It's a staggering statistic. 1 out of 5 Americans depends on the government just to make ends meet.
That means an astonishing 2/3 of federal spending now goes to provide benefits for Americans. How can the country afford to keep this up? Paul Strand has the story from Washington.
John Sweetland is a Maryland man receiving 3 checks from government, one for his military service, one for his time as a state employee, and one from Social Security. He's like 21% of his fellow Americans.
Let's just start with the dependent population. We have found that 1 out of every 5 Americans are significantly dependent on the federal government for the basics of life.
Beach puts out the annual Index of Dependence on Government. He points out that 21% is way up from the less than 8% of Americans who were substantially dependent on government 50 years ago. Beach also says that now
there's 115 million people, 1 out of 3, are getting some kind of a check from the government.
Sending out all those checks and all that aid now takes up a whopping 70% of the federal government's budget. And with the U.S. borrowing 43 cents of every dollar it spends, it's plunging the country deeper and deeper into staggering levels of debt. But Sweetland, for one, is not feeling guilty about the checks he's getting.
For 40-plus years, I put money into Social Security. Now I feel I'm just drawing my money back out.
But who's paying for all this? Beach has another stunning statistic.
49.5% of all the people in the United States are not paying an income tax.
With half the country not contributing to the general revenue, and with a third getting money from Uncle Sam, Beach worries it could permanently and dangerously warp the nation's politics.
They may be voting for people who will increase their benefits since they're not paying any of the costs involved. We could then see this death spiral of increasing dependency and increasing outlays.
But Sweetland is like many Americans who don't like the modern entitlement state and regularly vote for the politicians promising to cut many people off from it.
What angers me more than anything is those that sit around with the great give me, give me, give me mentality. They think that Uncle Sam has to give them all this stuff. No, Uncle Sam is not obligated to give them anything.
The thing is, even those who worked and paid in all their lives are likely to take far more out. A woman making an average income will pay about $87,000 in taxes, but government will spend $275,000 on her medical care alone. Beach says it's tough for any politician to chop away when so many of their constituents are now so dependent.
It just makes it really, really hard for a politician to stand up at a town hall and say, we need to reduce everybody's benefits here because we can't afford it. 1 out of 3 people in that audience will be getting something from the federal government.
Many Americans, though, even those now receiving government checks, worry if serious cutting doesn't start immediately, all these programs like Social Security and Medicare may well collapse.
I'm very, very worried. My son right now works a 40-hour job, and he is forced to pay money into something that he will probably never see.
Beach warns Americans.
These programs that they think are helping them, securing them from want, are all bankrupt programs.
With a massive wave of 77 million baby boomers set to retire in the years ahead, more and more Americans will depend on these programs. How will the country afford all this? So much is at stake, both for those who receive from and give to the government. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what I've felt, and I was in prayer, and I think that's what's happening. We don't have the political will here in America anymore to cut spending. You'll never get an agreement in Congress on cutting spending. And as a result, 43 cents out of every dollar we spend is borrowed. You can't keep that level of borrowing up before one day you go bankrupt. And when you do, then all those benefits go away. The government cannot have enough money to pay for police, to pay for school teachers, to pay for parks, to pay for any of the things that they keep, libraries, whatever the government pays for. Can't do it. And it certainly won't be able to send checks out. But right now, there's 152 million people who pay no taxes at all, with the exception, I suppose, of Social Security. So we've got a program, Social Security, that is bankrupt or near bankrupt. We've got something called Medicare, which is bankrupt. We've got a Medicaid program that is on life support. We've got these programs that, I mean, they're either bankrupt now or they're in the process of going bankrupt over the next several years. And yet the politicians won't deal with it. And it's going to be tough. You can understand now their dilemma. But what's going to happen? What's going to happen to our grandchildren and our children and to us as this great nation goes into default? Well, Lee Webb has the rest of our stories from the CBN Newsroom. Lee?
Well, Pat, we begin with a story that involves you indirectly. Actor George Clooney is using his star power to shine light on human rights abuses in Sudan. He credits the work of Christian aid groups providing healing and relief. Clooney returned from a trip to Sudan this week to document bombings, burned down villages, and ethnic killings near the border of South Sudan. He shared some of the victims' stories, including one about a boy who lost both hands during a bombing raid. He's urging lawmakers on Capitol Hill to increase pressure on the Muslim-dominated North to stop what he calls war crimes. Clooney told CBN News Christian ministries play a key role in helping those who are suffering.
They lead the work a lot of times here. When we were at the Darfur rally, it was ministers. You know, it was a lot of people of faith that had been working very hard on this. So in some ways, I'm trying to honor whatever part I can in the hard work that they do, because I'm a big fan of it, of all of the work that's being done, and people really put their hearts and souls in it.
Clooney also credited Pat Robertson for speaking out against the Sudanese government.
When Bono was doing his One campaign, that's when I met Pat Robertson. I said to Bono, who do you have from sort of the Christian world? And he was like, I don't know. And I said, well, what about Pat Robertson? So I called him up and I said, listen, we're not going to agree on too many things, but there's no two sides to this issue, and you and I could work together on this. And he said, great. And he's been terrific on this.
Clooney will also meet with the President and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to talk about Sudan. Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad faced some tough questioning from an unusual source, his own parliament. He is the first president in Iran's history to be called before the legislature there. They're accusing him of mismanaging Iran's economy and defying the authority of the country's supreme leader. During the questioning, Ahmadinejad joked around and even poked fun at how poorly written the questions were. Many of the lawmakers denounced his performance, saying he insulted the parliament. Ahmadinejad has been tangled in a conflict with lawmakers and the country's supreme leader. The Centers for Disease Control is launching its largest anti-smoking campaign Monday. The effort includes graphic ads on billboards, print, radio, and TV. They show people whose smoking resulted in heart surgery, lost limbs, paralysis, and other diseases. The campaign will cost $54 million, and it's the CDC's first national advertising effort. The agency hopes the campaign will persuade up to 50,000 Americans to stop smoking. The U.S. smoking rate has stayed steady at around 20% in recent years. Doctors are warning people to be on high alert now for the norovirus, commonly known as the stomach flu. Right now, we're at peak season for the highly contagious bug. Lori Johnson tells us what we can do to protect ourselves and our families.
The norovirus is transmitted on objects, not in the air. But it's robust, living up to 2 weeks on hard surfaces and up to 2 months in cold water. It causes vomiting, diarrhea, and stomach cramps that last about 2 days. The norovirus can spread like wildfire in crowded places like schools or confined areas like cruise ships. It's one of the leading causes of food poisoning, transmitted most often by eating salad food, raw oysters, or when any food comes in contact with contaminated hands or countertops.
Between 12 and 72 hours will be the incubation period. And that makes it tough to figure out what it was that you ate that got you sick. You can usually do a little investigative work talking to your friends about if you both had the same meal and they got sick, you can trace it back to that.
Although a whopping 1 in 15 people gets the norovirus, it's usually not very serious. But the diarrhea and vomiting it causes can sometimes lead to severe dehydration, so make sure to drink plenty of water. Keeping your hands clean is the best way to avoid getting the norovirus. Also, carefully wash your raw food. Disinfect surfaces with diluted bleach or a cleaner that contains bleach. and immediately wash and machine dry clothes that may have been infected. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
And it doesn't last all that long, Pat, but it's no fun to have that, I can tell you.
Yeah, I don't know if you had it or not. I haven't had it to the best of my knowledge, but it's horrible. And you think somebody on a cruise ship, you can't get off, and
Yeah,
a couple thousand people.
I'm a little spoiled for cruise ships after some of those stories. Good grief.
I've become a fanatic hand washer. You just have to wash your hands all the time. You know, you handle something, you know.
You don't think about how many times you touch something someone else touches just once you leave your house during the day. It's almost impossible
you know,
to
we're
avoid
all
it.
handshakers. I want to shake people's hands and show a modicum of affection, but at the same time, you don't know what that other hand has been touching. And so you really need, after you get through, to...
That's right.
Okay, hand washing.
That's right.
50 human rights activists from around the world are calling on Pakistan to free Asia Bibi. She's the imprisoned Pakistani Christian mother sentenced to death for blasphemy. Several groups signed a petition this week at a UN Human Rights Summit. Critics say Bibi is innocent, but Pakistan won't do anything because the government's afraid of backlash from Islamic radicals. Bibi has been in prison for nearly 3 years. Her case is on appeal. CBN News met with her husband and daughters late last year. They asked people to pray for her to be released safely home. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta met with Afghan President Hamid Karzai today. It's the first high-level meeting since the U.S. soldier reportedly killed 16 Afghan citizens last weekend. Afghan lawmakers are angry because the U.S. Army flew the soldier out of Afghanistan. They say Karzai should not sign a strategic partnership agreement with the U.S. unless the soldier stands trial in an Afghan court. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.